and you've got your own business, and when you start out, everybody is the CEO and chief bottle washer. And I think that there is some weird pride for people, for entrepreneurs that say, I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm still CEO and chief bottle washer. I think there was a time in my life where I thought that that was very admirable and I thought that was really great. And now when people tell me that and they've been doing it for 20 years, you're doing it wrong. If you need to scale, you need to give pieces to other people, you need to have employees, you need to have managers, you need to grow so that you're not the one having to do the small pieces. You need to be thinking big. You are the person who is driving the train. You need to be the conductor. You don't need to be the person who's oiling every wheel at every stop.
Hello, Profit First entrepreneurs. I am so excited. Today we have a very special guest, and we have Jeff Willock joining us from Dickerson and Willock PC. And now Jeff is a franchise attorney. I know you guys have been asked me tons of questions about franchises, so you are going to be super excited about this episode. And Jeff has reviewed over 400 franchise systems, so he is not new to franchises at all. And today we're going to talk specifically for you business owners out there who have really mastered your systems, how to become a franchiser. So please join me in welcoming Jeff Willock to the platform. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm well.
I'm very excited to have you. You know, I've get so many questions about scaling a business. And a lot of times when clients ask me like, okay, Susanne, I think we're ready for that second location. We're ready to start a location outside of our city, outside of our state. And I'm like, well, do you really want to start all over again? Do you really want to start all over again? How are you going to manage this team that lives like, miles and miles and hours away from you? And I think to myself, wouldn't it be great? You've already managed to master the systems. You've already managed to master the profits because you implemented Profit First. Wouldn't it be great just to consider creating a franchise, right? And becoming a franchisor and just really training others to do what you do.
That is certainly one of the advantages of being a franchisor. The franchisor is the person who has the system and is selling it to somebody else. And basically what I tell people is it is a way for you to expand your empire using other people's time, money, and energy.
I love that. So Jeff, tell me, how do you know when you are ready to create a franchise out of your business? Like, what is the perfect candidate for this?
That is a really good question. There is the legal part of it, the legal definition, the legal requirements, and then there's sort of the practical aspect of it. Legally, you can franchise even though you don't even have your own store yet. You could franchise even though you don't even know what it is that you are doing. As long as you make all of the proper disclosures, you can start franchising anytime you feel like it. I don't know who's going to buy that franchise, but in theory, you could do it that way. I think that you are ready as a business owner. You're ready to be a franchisor when you have your processes in place. My father used to always talk about processes when I was growing up. He would never say processes. It was always processes. And when you've got your system.
He must be from Canada.
Well, a long, long time ago. Yes, that's right. So when you've got your system, when you've got a business model that you're going to be able to teach other people to do. Some people are really ready to go and they're ready to start franchising after they've had their own first location, and that's all. Sometimes it takes a few more. And I was talking to Susanne a little bit about this earlier today. I think that some people are able to run their business just out of force of personality and force of will. They don't really have systems in place. They don't really have processes in place. They're just really, really good at working all the time and making sure everybody is doing what it is that they say. Once you have a second store, it's hard to run two locations out of force of will. But some people can do it. By the time you get to three, by that point, it's really, it's getting really, really hard. I suppose somebody could do it, but you're going to have to be working 170 hours a week to be in 3 different places to make sure everything is just going because you're demanding it. By the time you get to the third store, a lot of times the franchisor has processes in place. They have things that are required and they have systems. As soon as you have your systems, as soon as you're going to be able to teach somebody else what it is that you are doing without you needing to be there, you're ready to franchise.
I love that. That is amazing. So, guys, once you are at your profitability level, we call the target allocation percentages here in Profit First. Once you've got your systems in place that can be replicated, you are ready to become a franchiser. Now, as Jeff says, it's good to have a few under your belt to prove that you have a proven methodology, but definitely it's important to get those systems under place that really you can train and pass that down to someone else. So, Jeff, tell me, what is the first step? What do we do when we want to become a franchise? Where do we start?
Well, we talked about the practical aspect of it. The practical aspect of it is that, well, let me take a step back. There's the legal definition of what is a franchise. That's kind of irrelevant for today's purposes. And then there's the practical aspect of what makes you a franchise. What you're going to be doing is you're teaching somebody else to run their own business using your business model, using your brand, and then in return for that business owner, you're probably going to be receiving some sort of royalty stream. So the practical first step is you need to have your systems in place. You need to have that replicable business plan so that you can teach it to somebody else so that they are in fact going to be able to run the business on their own, because it is going to be their business to run. They're not your employee. They don't want to be your employee. You don't want them to be your employee. It's going to be their business. Unfortunately, this is a very highly regulated area of the law. And so before you're able to franchise, before you're able to start selling or even soliciting people, you're going to have to create this big, thick, hairy beast of a document called an FDD. And when I say you, I really mean a franchise attorney for you. A franchise disclosure document. A franchise disclosure document, I always refer to it as sort of a cross between an SEC private placement memorandum and Cliff Notes. It's going to give a prospective franchisee due diligence information about who you are and what's your background, and have you been involved in litigation or bankruptcies, and who are your affiliates, to give them some information. It's going to give them summaries of the terms of the deal. It's going to give them what it is that they're really going to need in terms of initial investment. It's also going to include a copy of the franchise agreement, word for word, in the form that the franchisee is going to have to sign off on it. And then it usually is going to include some other peripheral contracts. It's going to include some audited financial statements and some other very specific things like receipts that the Federal Trade Commission says that they have to have. And then you're going to give that whole big FDD to your prospective franchisee, and they're going to have it for at least 14 days. It's a cooling off period. And then once they've had that and they're interested in moving forward, they'll sign. Probably they will pay you some sort of initial fee. Then you'll start helping them. They'll be starting their business, and everybody's off to the races.
I love that. And you guys heard that audited financial statements. I know that's going to be scary for some of you guys out there that haven't gone through that process yet, but you're playing with the big boys now. It's a whole different story with that.
Well, here's some good news for me and some bad news for Suzanne. The first year, you're not going to have audited financial statements. And so there's some ways around that. Either a new franchisor exception, or we'll set up a new business so you don't have to have it in the first year. But eventually, as you continue to sell from year to year, you'll have to update your FDD, which means you'll have to include the audited financial statements. Eventually, you'll roll into having 3 years worth of audited financial statements in your FDD. But for right now, everybody stay calm. You don't have to have them audited yet.
Darn, I was like, cha-ching. All right. So Jeff, tell me in terms of the benefits of becoming a franchise. Let's talk about franchise fees, what you typically see, what that is from a revenue standpoint for someone that's looking to become a franchisor, and what are the overall benefits of becoming a franchisor?
Well, and I said it before, and I guess I'll say it again, is that you're going to grow your own empire using other people's time, energy, and money. The goal here is that you probably want to have 50, 60, 100 franchisees in your system. Don't really do this if you're going to have 2. Don't really do this if you're planning on having 4. I had somebody call me and they say, I want to franchise my business and I really only want to have 2 franchisees. Well, that's, let's find a different business mechanism for that, because that's not really appropriate. It's not a good idea for you to spend all of this time, energy, and money on your FDD if all you're really going to seek is a couple of franchisees. But you do want to have a bunch of them.
What are you seeing in terms of franchisor revenue?
In terms of what it is that they're getting. Right. So people come to me and they say, well, I know that this is a franchise because there's an initial fee. Well, that's not what makes it a franchise. I know that this is a franchise because there's a royalty associated with it. That's not what makes it a franchise. But those things are very common. Typically, what a franchisor will get is that they will get an initial fee up front. I would say that the initial fee most commonly is somewhere in the range of $30,000 to maybe $50,000 is an initial fee. Then on top of that, the franchisor is typically paid a royalty. The royalty is typically a percentage based on gross revenue, not net, not profits, gross. And the reason that it's based on gross is it goes back to the concept of this is their business that they're going to run. They don't want you involved in day-to-day decisions. You don't want to be involved in day-to-day decisions. Well, the problem is, from a royalty standpoint, is that if we, the franchisor, are going to get paid based on net or based on profits, well, profits can be manipulated. And I don't mean inappropriately manipulated or illegally manipulated, but for the purposes of reporting profits, and you're all about profits, I can put my now 22-year-old daughter at the front desk, even though she's not an attorney, and we can pay her hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary, and lo and behold, my law firm doesn't have any profits this year. Well, we can't do it that way in the world of franchising because the franchisor doesn't want to be looking over the shoulder of the franchisee to make sure that they are running their business correctly, that they don't have too many employees, that they're not overpaying people. This is the franchisee's business, and they don't want the franchisor doing any of those things. And that's the reason that it's based on gross revenues. Now, gross revenues they do back out a couple of things. Sales tax, obviously, we're not going to be getting a percentage of the sales tax that they're collecting. Probably going to exclude any sort of refunds. If it's a business that might involve tips to the employees, we're going to exclude the tips. But everything else, every dollar that rolls in, sometimes whether collected or not, that's going to be the gross revenue. And then of that, the franchisor is probably going to take somewhere along the lines of 5, 6, 7, 8% of gross revenue. Now, there's some industries that is a higher number. There's some industries that are a lower number, but as a general proposition, the franchisor is probably going to get somewhere between 5 and 8% of gross revenues. So that's what the franchisor is going to get. On top of that, we're also going to require the franchisee probably to contribute to the franchisor to hold some sort of additional percentage to go toward the national advertising fund or a brand fund. Now, it's being paid to the franchisor, but it's supposed to be going off into a different bank account. It's not supposed to be going into a slush fund. It's not supposed to be going to the franchisor to use however they feel like it. It really is supposed to be used for branding. That's probably another 1 to 3% that the franchisee will be paying. And then on top of that, the last thing that the franchisee will be paying is that they'll also probably be paying some sort of percentage of their gross revenues toward their own local advertising. Because again, this is their business. Now, we want to make sure that they're successful. We, the franchisor, want to make sure they're successful. And so we're going to require them to pay this percentage every month, more if they want, but at least this percentage every month. The whole point is, if you're a franchisee, what is it that you're getting? All right, we've talked about what the franchisor is getting. What's the franchisee getting? Well, hopefully they're getting the replicable business plan that we talked about, branding, that they are not, hopefully at some point there's going to be a whole lot of these. And so there's going to be cross branding that's associated with it. And there's going to be this ongoing assistance from the franchisor. But things like, we're going to make you spend X many dollars on your own local advertising. Is that assistance per se? Kind of it is, because I'm going to work really hard to have you be properly prepared to go out and succeed. And we're not going to let you just grow organically over a period of the next 10 or 15 years, because you're not going to make it if it takes you 10 or 15 years. We're going to jumpstart you. We're going to teach you how to do this thing, which not only is just flipping the hamburgers, but it's running the business itself. It's going out and finding people to come in and eat your hamburgers. And I'm just using hamburgers. Obviously, there's all sorts of industries. We're going to teach you how to market, how to hire people, how to oversee your staff, how to do billing, all of the business aspects of it, in addition to the thing that the business is about.
I love that. And those are things that take a decade to learn, right? Most
And
of
that's
us,
the reason that franchisees want to buy in. I have found, I don't know who I thought the most common franchisee was going to be, but I will tell you my personal experience, having done this hundreds and hundreds of times, is a very common franchisee is somebody that's come out of corporate America, to be perfectly honest. They are 45 to 55 years old. They've come out of a corporate environment. For whatever reason, that's not available to them anymore. Either there was a downsizing, maybe they just retired early and then they decided, oh, you know what, I'm not really ready to retire early. Well, they were working for Exxon. They're not going to go start their own major oil company. And the truth of the matter is, they're not really super entrepreneurial. They're kind of entrepreneurial. I call them corporate entrepreneurs. They want to go out and do something on their own, but they don't really know what the thing is that they're going to go and do on their own. And so that's what the franchisee is looking for a lot of times. And that's what the franchisor is going to provide, is it's going to give them the opportunity to have their own business, but they don't have to start from ground zero and spend years and years and years both figuring out what they're going to do and then how they're going to do it and then how they're going to do it well.
exactly, because I mean, you're a business owner just like I am. And, it took me probably about 5 years in business to learn how to manage people, made a whole lot of mistakes along the way. And then, at 10 years, it was learning to manage people while scaling, right? Like when do you start to add on people and still make a profit with that too
The
and keep
skill is a
everybody
big
trained?
deal. I always say that I don't think it's really all that hard to do legal work. I think it's hard to find legal work, and it took me a really, really long time to figure out how to do that. And so hopefully those are the types of things: management, advertising, marketing, client development. Those are the things that the franchisor is going to teach, and there is huge value to that.
Oh yeah, yeah. But time is money, right? Time is money, and to have those profits early on that you're able to reinvest or to put towards retirement, it makes a significant difference. Especially if you're starting a business at 45, right? Between 45 and 55, those are your golden years that
Well, and
things
then
need to happen fast.
there's a statistic that I think something like 80% of new businesses fail after 5 years or within 5 years. In the world of franchising, a lot of the franchise professionals like to tout that 80% of franchisees are still in business and successful after 5 years. So it's almost a complete flip. Now, I don't think it's quite as simple as that, but I think that it does make a point. And again, that's what the franchisee is looking for, and that's what the franchisor can provide. And so there is huge value, which is the reason that they're getting paid.
I love that. So, like you heard Jeff, the SBA tells us that, after 5 years, only 35 or is it 10 years, 35% are left standing. And really, the franchisee rate of survival is much higher than the regular corporate or regular small business because, they are getting from the start, they're learning the pitfalls, they're learning the mistakes, and they're learning how to avoid that because they're taking your systems and your know-how and really implementing that from the get-go. And so they're able to achieve that profitability much faster than had they started on their own, which is great. And another thing that I love that Jeff talked about too is, when as an accountant, I always look at the Dun and Bradstreet reports, right? The industry reports, the Hoover reports. And it's always been amazing to me because when I look at what they're seeing typically on an average business, you'll see profitability rates of probably like 1 or 2%. Now, this is not the profit first world, but and out there, that normal profitability
Right.
rate is like 1 to 2%, right? And imagine like being able to, achieve profitability much faster, right? And that is great. And not only that, as a franchisor, the benefit is you're not getting paid based upon profitability. Like Jeff said, you don't control the profits, right? You can hire your daughter and pay her a six-figure salary, or they can do that, or they can manipulate earnings, or just make bad decisions and not listen to what your recommendations are. But to be able to take revenue from the top line, it's a much more profitable item because you have less what we call cost of goods sold or costs of revenue because you're literally selling your talent, your innate talent, skill sets, and know-how. And so it becomes a different generation of revenue source for you, which is really great. And so, Jeff, I have to ask because you work with like over 400 franchise systems, right?
Oh,
um, I have to ask, where does it go wrong? Where are the landmines with starting to franchise your business? Where do things go wrong?
well, if you're the franchisor, we've talked about you need to have your system, in place, or at least be heading in that direction. I do want to point out everything doesn't have to be perfect by the time you start franchising. McDonald's wasn't McDonald's when they started franchising. It's developed over the years. You don't have to have everything exactly right. You don't even have to have an operations manual. You can just have all of these things in your mind. Now, you're going to be teaching these things all to your franchisees. Where things start going wrong, golly, I think the first thing that you're going to do wrong, franchisor, is that you're going to sell to anybody who tells you your baby is pretty. The very first person that comes along that says, I've got my initial fee and I want to be a franchisee. Well, that's a good start, but we need to investigate them a little bit more. They need to do due diligence about you, and you need to do due diligence about them. There's the 80-20 rule. We spend 80% of our time on 20% of our problems. Franchisors are going to spend most of their time on a couple of problematic franchisees. Try your best. You will probably wind up, in fact, the more franchisees you have, the more likely that eventually one of them is going to give you some problems. Whose fault is that? I don't know, but that's just this, statistically, that's how this is going to turn out. But vet these people before you let them into the system. One of the things that you don't want is you don't want somebody who is sort of a cowboy and they want to do everything their own way. I never really quite understand this. People that buy into systems and they spend all of this money and they're paying all of this royalty, they want to buck the system and do it their own way. Well, if you wanted to do it all on your own, go do it all on your own. You've paid all of this money, follow the system. That's somebody else you might want to be looking out for. It's not really going to be a very good fit for you. So where else do people go wrong on this? Providing not enough support and trying to be too involved. A lot of entrepreneurs, they are used to running everything and this all being about them and they've got, control over everything. If you do want to be chief bottle washer as well as CEO, that's fine. I've got some thoughts about that, but go do that in your own business. You're not going to be involved in their day-to-day operations. It's about teaching them and then letting them. It's like having teenagers who become adults. At some point, you got to let them go, and they're going to have to do all of their things on their own.
I love that. That is some really golden nuggets there. I mean, this vet who you marry, right? Because once you're in that franchise agreement, you are in a contract. He told you it's like a long contract with audited
Probably
financials.
at least a 10-year agreement. And that goes both sides, the franchisee and the franchisor. You're not business partners in a legal sense, but as a practical matter, you are business partners. These are people that both sides want to feel good about the other side.
Oh yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, your business is your baby, right? It takes you decades to build it and it can take you literally minutes to lose that entire reputation. So you want to be careful about who you are allowing into your franchise. Just like you want to be careful who you're hiring, right? Because at the end of the day, they represent you and they become who you are. So that is some really good golden nuggets. I mean, especially if you're talking about a decade or longer relationship, you got to be careful. So are there certain businesses that are or industries that are better to franchise versus others in your experience?
No, not really. There are, goods businesses. There are goods and products. There are service businesses. Some of them are done fixed location, brick and mortar. Some of them are done out of the house. If you've got a brick and mortar, I think a sandwich shop is a really good, example of a brick and mortar. If we're going to give them a brick and mortar, we're probably going to give the franchisee some sort of exclusive territory that's going to be a circle around their location, maybe with a 2-mile radius or something like that. If you've got more of a service business, even if you're providing business to business, we're probably going to give you a territory, and it might be zip codes, or it might be a map with a yellow line around where it is that your territory is going to be. So no, I don't think there really is. There's no limitation on what your business can do or what sort of business could be a franchise, as long as it's replicable and you can teach somebody else to do it.
I love it. That's amazing. And I'm sure you're starting to see that shift now since COVID, as we all started to shift towards that online
It,
economy starting to be more of a norm for us.
it has exploded. I think I've had more calls in the last 12 months from potential franchisees than I have ever had before. I think a lot of people are looking for alternatives. A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people just aren't happy in what it is that they're doing, and they feel like they want to take control of their own destiny. But again, they're not really entrepreneurial. If they were, they probably would have already started something. And so they want to go out and they don't want to be held by the hand to do it, but they want to be given an opportunity. And hopefully you can teach them, and then they can go run the business, and then everybody will have this great, synergistic relationship.
I love that. I love that. New industries are emerging because of COVID, and also new people are wanting to enter an entrepreneurship. But like Jeff said, if you're 45, 55, you got to get in there fast. So there's a lot of opportunity as a franchisor out there to really be able to grow your empire, as he said. I love how he says that.
And
Also,
another example, just to kind of give more illustrations. Sometimes people will incorrectly refer to franchises as businesses in a box. And I guess that kind of makes sense from what I've talked about a little bit, but it's not a business in a box. You don't open up a box and out pops a business and then money starts raining down from, the business tree. You're getting a toolkit. Franchisor, think about it, I've talked about processes, but think about a toolkit. When I go to Home Depot or I go to Lowe's and I want to go build a thing, well, I need all of the tools to build the thing and then probably some instructions. I want the instructions to be really good, and I want all of the tools to be really good, and I want the toolkit to be complete. Now, I come home from Lowe's and I've got my toolkit in a box. I'm going to have to pick up the hammer and sweat. I'm going to have to get out my level and use it and make sure that it's all good. But what I'm hoping for is that I got good instructions and I got a complete toolkit with good tools. Franchisors, think about that in terms of what it is that you're going to be giving to your franchisees.
oh yeah, you got to have some really good SOPs or standard operating procedures that you're giving out, because you don't want anyone opening that box and go, "Where is the instructions?" Right? That
Right.
is not a good thing.
That's right.
I love that. So, Jeff, one of the things that we love to ask our guests as we're winding down today is if you could leave us with one piece of advice, and this can be personal, it can be business related, that really will help take us to the next level, what would that piece of advice be?
I think my piece of advice would be, and this is kind of trite, it sounds like a poster that you see on a wall, only do what only you can do. When you've got your own business and when you start out, everybody is the CEO and chief bottle washer. And I think that there is some weird pride for people, for entrepreneurs that say, I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm still CEO and chief bottle washer. I think there was a time in my life where I thought that that was very admirable and I thought that was really great. And now when people tell me that and they've been doing it for 20 years, you're doing it wrong. If you need to scale, you need to give pieces to other people, you need to have employees, you need to have managers, you need to grow so that you're not the one having to do the small pieces. You need to be thinking big. You are the person who is driving the train. You need to be the conductor. You don't need to be the person who's oiling every wheel at every stop. So get out of, stay in CEO all the time, but get away from chief bottle washer as soon as you can. Now, at the beginning, everybody starts off being chief bottle washer, and that's okay, but move away from that. Scale. Do what Susanne tells you to do.
I love that. You're right, because a lot of times when we start our business, it's because we're good at that, right? Maybe I'm a good bottle washer, right? And that's why I started a business to be a bottle washer. But in order to really take your business to the next level, you can't stay in the trenches. You've got to groom somebody else to do it, right? Just like Jeff says, with the franchise, having those standard operating procedures that you're actually giving someone so they can become the next bottle washer, being able to think from that level. So I love that. That is a great piece of advice. And I definitely appreciate that. Now, Jeff, how can we reach you? How can we contact you? How can we reach you? How can we find you to work with you so that
Easy
we
enough.
can have
Go
franchises?
to texasfranchiseattorney.com.
Got it. Texas.
Franchiseattorney.com.
I lo-
I am located in Texas. I'm a Texas attorney. I'm licensed by the State Bar of Texas. Franchising is sort of a national industry, and so I help people all over the country. I've helped foreign franchisors come into the United States. I've helped people from Germany and Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan and the Far East become franchisees in the United States. But I am the texasfranchiseattorney.com. So if you're in Texas, you can even stop over and say hello, but go to texasfranchiseattorney.com.
Thank you. And even if you're not in Texas, Jeff can still help you. So
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and put Jeff's contact information in the show notes so that you can reach out to him and reach him to help you really establish your franchise in order to help other business owners grow and at the same time increase your own profits. Thank you, Jeff, so much for being our guest today on the Profit Talk.
Suzanne, thank you so much for having me.